Hello, this is Simon Jones from Antiques for Everyone. Today we've come into my snooker room. Now, snooker's always been a passion of mine since I was a small boy, and I played in a lot of tournaments and local leagues, even played against a few professionals over the years, including I played against Ronnie O'Sullivan when I was 15, which was an amazing experience. And when I started getting involved in auctions and the auction world, I started to see antique snooker cues and billiard cues coming up in auctions. And I thought, well, it would be a really interesting area to collect, given my obvious interest in snooker. So during the 19th century, sort of late 19th century and early 20th century, there was a huge explosion in the interest in snooker. Lots of snooker clubs popped up, lots of people started to play, and as a result, they needed to produce a lot more snooker cues for the market. And there were a huge number of snooker cues made by a lot of the major factories of the day. So Burroughs and Watts and Riley's and various other factories who started to produce a whole variety of cues to service the market. And if you're collecting, there is a massive variety of different cues that you can collect. And I've just brought a few along today to talk about. Now, this is the cue that I use. It dates to around the 1920s, 1930s. Now, it's made of ash. And you can see that it has a very distinctive sort of dark grain to it. And most professionals these days would tend to go for ash as their cue of choice. Ash is a very good material to make snooker cues in. It's sturdy but flexible. And you can see with older cues that they have much more flex in them. So if you hold it on your hand and just tap it, you can feel the sort of whip in the cue, which you get with older cues. Now, when you buy more modern snooker cues these days, they are much more rigid. Now, with the modern cues, you get much more power because of that rigid nature. But I've always loved the feel of an old cue. There's something about the way that it feels in the hand and the touch that you can get with it. I've used this an awful lot over the years. In fact, the picture badge on it is almost worn away where I've used it over the last sort of 20 years or so. So this is an ash cue made in the 1920s, 1930s. I've also brought along a few other cues here. Now these two are made of maple. Now you can see the difference with these cues. They are much smoother than with ash, almost no grain visible at all. And a lot of people used to like maple cues to use, probably not so much with modern players these days, but they have a very different look. The other thing to mention about snooker cues is whether they are hand spliced or whether they are machine spliced. Now the splicing is this area here where you set one wood into the shaft of the cue. Now on this one, which is an old cue made by Riley's, you can see that it has a sort of curved end at the end of the splice. Now that is where it has been made by hand. If I show you one in contrast that's been done by machine, like this one, you can see that because it's been made by a machine, it's very pointed and very precise, and that comes with being machine made. It's a very distinct difference between a machine splice and one made by hand. The other thing to say about snooker cues is that the major manufacturers like Riley's and Burroughs and Watts and others, they would get famous players to endorse their cues. You get various pictorial plaques on the cues, endorsing the cues by the major manufacturers, by famous players of the day. So going way back in time, people like Joe Davis have endorsed their cue and various other famous players, and that still runs today. You can still buy a Jimmy White cue or a Ronnie O'Sullivan cue. It's the same principle. They would put their name to the manufacturer's cue, and that would hopefully encourage people to buy them. Now, snooker cues vary enormously in value when you're buying old examples. Some can be a few pounds, some can be 50, £100. When you get the much rarer examples, then they can be a few £100s upwards. But there's a whole variation of prices as a collector. And if you're starting off just buying a few here and there, they are affordable to buy and hopefully ones that you can actually play with and use just for a bit of fun. The rarer cues are the ones that have been made in much smaller numbers. If you get a mass-produced cue, there's obviously a lot of them around. What collectors are looking for are the cues that were made in much smaller numbers, perhaps endorsed by a less well-known player of the day. And those cues can then command a lot more money when they appear in auction. We'll show you some photographs at the end of this video just to show you different plaques and manufacturers that you will come across when you start to collect. And I hope you have as much fun as I have in collecting cues in the future.